We are the Greek Phalanx. We are representing the citizen militias of the ancient Greek city-states about 2,500 years ago. The archaic and the classical eras are a time that we kind of collectively think of as the classical era. Basically, Greece was not a nation. Greece was a collection of city-states, often warring city-states. Athens and Sparta being the most famous, but 1,000 others constituted the Greek world. The Greeks were united by a few things: their language, their religion, their games. The Olympic Games and others were a time when everyone sort of laid down their weapons and came together as Greeks. And they're also united by the way they fought. That was primarily as what I'm presenting today, which is a Greek hoplite. That basically translates to man-at-arms. It means I have all the tools of war. And to be a hoplite, the three tools you had to have are your heavy wooden shield, your thrusting spear, and your bronze helmet. Everything else was sort of optional if you could afford it. And that's a key concept, because you do have to be able to purchase this all yourself. No one is equipping you, no one is issuing you this equipment. You're buying it yourself, and it was extremely expensive. So even though I'm not a professional soldier, I am probably a prosperous farmer, maybe a prosperous tradesman, who is able to outfit this stuff and thus kind of earn my place in my city-state's phalanx. Now, a phalanx is a long linear formation, basically a shield wall, maybe 8 ranks deep on average, sometimes more, sometimes less, and hundreds or even thousands wide. A big polis like Athens could turn out a phalanx of up to 10,000 hoplites, but a smaller city-state might just have a few dozen or a few hundred. This was generally a pretty close order formation. You might have had the shields actually overlapping. And you can see if you have the greaves on your feet and the helmet and the shield, you're pretty well protected. You then advance towards the enemy phalanx, which would be outfitted exactly identically, and it would be a pretty nasty fight until one side or the other broke and ran, which is inevitably going to happen. It's going to happen probably pretty quickly. When it does, you don't necessarily chase them down. You don't pursue the defeated enemy back to their city-state. You don't besiege and destroy and enslave. These are not wars of conquest. They're wars of contest. They're small little victories that are marked that day, that are remembered for being a battlefield victory. These city-states continue to coexist. You build a trophy after the
victory. After the victory, you usually build a tropeon, which was sort of to mark.
Well, can I go back and
yes,
say
yes.
that? I don't want.
So sorry.
You can talk about your thing in a minute
yes,
here.
yes.
Let me just get this. Sorry. After battle. And the defeated would have left the battlefield, fled the battlefield, maybe throwing their arms down as they went. The turning point would be marked by what the Greeks called a tropeon. It's from the Greek word for to turn, as in turning point of the battle. And this would be a scarecrow that they'd erect from armor stripped off the dead bodies of the defeated. And it would go up. This is where we get our word for trophy. It was a commemoration of the victory at the point where the victory was made. The enemy, the defeated, would then send a herald back to request the bodies of their dead, which the victors would almost certainly grant. And then everyone would get to go home. And that's a key thing to understand. These are not wars of conquest. They're wars of contest. When the battle is won, the war is over, everyone goes home, they tend their fields, they mind their shops, life goes on. And it's this sort of limited model of warfare, this constant but low intensity warfare that guaranteed the peace and prosperity of the ancient Greek world for many centuries. These small city-states coexisting, warring constantly over the centuries, but continuing to coexist, not swallowing each other up, not enslaving each other's women and children and slaughtering men. The Greeks were not into empire building. It's a very interesting contrast, because what they are eventually replaced by are empire builders. They are ultimately defeated. The city-states of southern Greece in particular are defeated when the Macedonians under King Philip and his son Alexander come down from the north with a professionalized army. They're equipped a bit differently. They've made a few steps on the evolutionary path militarily, but the main difference is that they're professional soldiers. And the amateur militiamen of the city-states just can't stand up to that. They're defeated, and that's pretty much the end of the classical Greek world and of Greece as an independent entity for many centuries.
The sword, was that brass, or had it gotten to steel at any point?
Well, the Greeks weren't using brass at all. They were using bronze, which is a different... The Greeks, their main metal is bronze. They had iron. So the era we're depicting is technically the Iron Age. The weapons, the spear tips, the swords were made of iron, but the armor is made of bronze, which is an alloy of copper and tin. Brass is an alloy of copper and zinc, and the Romans will develop brass. I think the Romans are the ones who developed brass, but at this point in history, the armor is bronze.
Hence the Bronze Age.
Well, it's not technically the Bronze Age. The Bronze Age is a few hundred years before that, because, like I said, we have developed iron. We're using steel. We're starting to figure out how to use iron. Iron is cheaper. It's lighter. It's stronger. It's going to replace bronze entirely, but they haven't quite figured out how to make armor out of it yet. Towards the end of our era, you're going to start seeing the first steel cuirasses, probably worn by Philip of Macedon himself.
All right. So basically, where my impression comes into play happens around the phalanx, between the back and the sides of the phalanx. We usually go in from outside the phalanx to harass the enemy phalanx. Our job is peltasts, as we were called, which means honestly to pelt. Right? We would go out from around the phalanx and try to soften up the other side. And the thing is, the major difference, obviously, you're noticing less armor, more armor. Thing is, we needed to be fast. We needed to try and get out of the way as fast as possible. Go in, get out, get the job done, and let them handle like the heavier duty work. Now, you can see my equipment, right? Sometimes I would have maybe a dagger or something. I don't have one with me today, but I do have javelins. These javelins were small, but they were very light, very nimble. I can make them myself if I wanted to, and they would have iron tips just like a spear. And basically, right, we would have multiple kinds of pelting weapons. We would have javelins, we have slings, sometimes they have lead balls on them, and funny enough, sometimes those lead balls would have engravings on them. That means say things like, look out. Actually, there has been evidence of a stamp that found it said, look out, right? And basically, they could be manufactured. Sometimes they could be rocks too, if you were just desperate, pick up a rock and use that as a sling, throw it. And other times there would also be archers. But yeah, we would run out and throw as many as we can as we had, but then they'd get too close. We'd run on back behind him and he'd do the rest of the work for us. And we would mostly be poorer, less wealthy, because people who wore that were wealthy enough to afford it. We would just come in our bare, just our skivvies, really, and we would be able. And yes, sometimes you're probably noticing that some of us are barefoot. There's not a lot of there's a lot of depictions of people in pottery, but sometimes with bare feet, majority of the time, because the fact is, they'd want to depict them sometimes even naked as heroic in a way. Now, there's very little evidence that a lot of them did wear sandals, but the majority of us can assume, based on testing that we have done in the environment, the Phalanx has been to Greece. We have studied the fact that sometimes it just is much more comfortable wearing sandals over there. But all the same, sometimes less sandals creates more grip on my foot. I can be able to run faster. But yeah, and as you can see, our shields are also very different. So you have a big shield, heavier shield, good for facing another Phalanx. This shield's good for defending me from other Peltasts who might want to actually try and ward me off. So this is made of rawhide in the front, and that rawhide is tied to wicker. And this wicker is good and light enough for me to run with. See, that shield's made of planks of wood, maybe sometimes even a metal around the rim, bronze around the rim. You probably want to. Sometimes they would be able to race with those, and that has been practiced later on. But the point is mostly as protection that against a Phalanx, and this is protection against other ranged objects.
Would each of you tell me your name?
My name is CJ. If anything, my impression, I created the name Carlos for my impression, but my name is CJ Hernandez, and I've been getting into this, honestly, since maybe I've gotten into reenactment more recently, but I've been into ancient Greece and the era that we depict for a very, very, very long time. I think we both have for a very long time. And it takes that amount of love of the craft and dedication to the history to know all the things that we know about this era that is very much slept on by the
And your name?
My name is Andrew Yamato. I'm the founder and leader of the Greek Phalanx reenactment group. We actually started here 4 years ago. This was our very first event 4 years ago.